Steve said confidently. "I built that house, so it belongs to me. Now you have to leave, even though we're splitting up." "I don't think you can manage on your part-time pay," Steve chuckled as he showed her the divorce papers. "My name's Katie. I'm 33 years old. Recently, I got a job working part-time at a nearby supermarket. I married Steve 3 years ago after we met at work and both quit at the same time. I wanted to keep working after we got married, but he wanted me to stay home. So I became a full-time housewife, even though I really missed working. But I kept feeling like I wanted to work outside the house more and more. After a lot of talking, I finally got a part-time job. We want kids, but we haven't been able to have any yet. I really wanted a cat as a pet, but Steve really doesn't like them, so I sadly had to give up on the idea. Steve used to want me to stay home all the time, but he got mad when I started working part-time and started complaining about everything I did. You went to work again today, huh? Lately, it seems like the house is getting messier. Are the clothes all wrinkled in the laundry? You're not keeping up with the housework," Steve criticized. That wasn't true. I had finished cleaning before going to work, and the laundry was perfectly done. "What are you talking about? I'm doing everything just like before. It's obviously clean, can't you see?" I argued. He's complaining about the food again. "Fried chicken, really? Can't you cook something different?" He complained. I didn't make fried chicken that often, and I tried to make different meals every day despite having limited time. "I put effort into making your favorite fried chicken, and I make a variety of dishes," I defended myself. But whenever I tried to speak up, he got even angrier. "Are you saying you're too busy because of your part-time job? You're just pretending to be busy. Don't act like your job is important when it barely pays anything," he scolded. "You're only working because you're selfish. Your earnings were fine to begin with. Make sure you do the housework properly. Don't make excuses about not having time. It's embarrassing to work so hard for such a low wage." Steve always insulted my job with hurtful words. He used to say he wanted me to be a housewife so people wouldn't think we were struggling financially. But he constantly belittled my part-time job, bragging about how he made enough money that we didn't need to worry about expenses. Being constantly insulted for my work with such cruel words was unbearable. Every day, his words made me furious. One day, we decided to go visit Steve's parents' house, where we hadn't been in a while. Even though I had been annoyed with Steve for a long time, I was glad to get out of the house for a change. I didn't know what would happen when we got to his parents' house. After driving for a few hours, we got to Steve's parents' house. His mom, who lived alone, welcomed us with a smile. After dinner, which she cooked, Steve went out to play slot machines. While washing dishes with my mother-in-law, her mood changed. She wasn't as calm as before, and her face looked serious. As I made coffee, wondering what was wrong, we sat on the sofa, and she started talking. "Katie, according to Steve, you're working part-time. Why do you need to work when he has a good job? Also, he says you're not keeping up with the housework because you're too busy with your job," she said. I was taken aback by her sudden words. "No, that's not true. I'm handling everything just fine," I responded. My mother-in-law acted surprised, saying, "Oh, I've heard from Steve about how bad you are at housework. There's no point in lying. He's been dealing with this alone. He's exhausted from work, and it's sad that he has to come home to a messy house. You're not cooking proper meals, are you? Quit that part-time job. Your workplace won't miss you. They can find someone else. Your job is to take care of the house, okay? Focus on the house and support Steve properly from now on. Don't embarrass yourself as Steve's wife." My mother-in-law has traditional beliefs, thinking a wife should stay home. She got married right after school and never worked, always being a full-time housewife. Steve also grew up believing that's how a wife should be. That's why they both don't like the idea of me working outside. But my mother-in-law's words were too harsh. She not only dismissed my job. Those hurtful words really got to me. I was putting in so much effort at my part-time job, and everyone there was supportive and kind. It was a positive atmosphere, and I felt appreciated and relied upon. It broke my heart to hear myself talked about like I was useless, especially when my mother-in-law didn't even know anything about my job. And finding out that Steve had been saying bad things about me behind my back, despite me taking care of our home, was a shock. I was actually working harder than ever to make sure everything was in order, even with my part-time job. I knew Steve's job was tough, so I was doing my best to help out. But hearing him and his mother gossiping about me on the phone was hard to swallow. I didn't want to believe it. After hearing such awful things, I felt really down for a few days. But then, I remembered my father's face. Since my mother passed away, he'd been living alone in our family home. He lived a bit far from me, and I hadn't visited him recently because I'd been busy. I needed to hear his voice, so I called him. Usually he picks up right away, but that day, it rang for a long time. Just as I started to worry, he finally answered. "Katie, it's been a while. Are you well?" Hearing my father's calm voice, I felt a wave of relief, and tears began to flow. "What happened?" "It took you a long time to pick up the phone." "If you're busy, I can call back later," I said. "No, I'm sorry. I recently fell down the stairs and hurt my back. I can't move around much now, but don't worry about me. I'll be okay soon. By the way, what's going on? Is everything okay?" he replied. I was really surprised. My dad, who used to be so active, had fallen down the stairs and hurt his back. "No, I'm okay. Just make sure you take care of yourself and get better soon. I'll come to visit you soon, so wait for me," I assured him. "Yeah, I'm okay," he said. But then I thought, he's already considered elderly and injuries might take longer to heal. I had always been reassured by his energy, but suddenly I felt worried. If he keeps using the stairs every day, he might slip again. Plus, the stairs in our old family home are a bit steep, and there are tall steps in the entrance and bathroom. I became really worried about my dad living there and taking care of his back. What if something bad happens and he gets seriously hurt? I couldn't just ignore it. I always thought it would be nice to live closer to him, but now I knew I had to act fast. I decided to build a safer, easier-to-use home for my dad nearby. I had some money from managing apartments that my grandfather left me. Originally, it was meant for my dad, but he put it in my name just in case. He told me to keep it quiet from my husband. I had saved all the rent money until now. I wanted to use that money to build a new house for my dad. I felt really happy thinking about giving him such a great gift, especially since I hadn't been able to do much to help him before. Building the house would cost a lot of money, and I couldn't just keep it a secret. I needed to talk to Steve about it. I was nervous he might not agree and might get upset, but instead he said, "I understand. It makes sense to get him a new house, especially considering his age. If you think you can handle it, go for it. Just don't expect me to help if things get tough." He insulted me again, which made me angry, but arguing would only make things worse. So I decided not to argue back this time. It made things simpler for me. I immediately started looking for a good contractor and began the process of building the new house. But it seemed like Steve wasn't happy with the idea of me actually going through with it. He didn't say anything, so I tried not to pay too much attention to it. But he usually wasn't the type to keep quiet. One day, I was shocked when I went to the bank to take out money for groceries. $3,000 was missing from our living expenses, all taken out at once. I couldn't remember spending such a big amount of money. There was only one person who could have done this. It was hard to believe that Steve would take the money without asking, but it was clear that the money was gone. That night, I confronted him. When I went to the bank today, I saw that $3,000 was taken out from our living expenses. "Do you know anything about this?" I asked. Steve arrogantly replied, "I gave it to my mother. You said you were going to build a house, so you must have been saving up somewhere, right? $3,000 isn't a big deal." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Why did you give her money? Your mother isn't exactly struggling, is she? And that's our living expenses. It's not fair to give away such a big amount without even talking to me about it," I argued. He snapped back. "What do you know about my mother? She said she needed help. What's wrong with a son helping his mother? Plus, that money was earned by me. How I use it is none of your business. If it bothers you, try earning as much as I do with your part-time job. You can't say anything now, can you? Don't ever complain about what I do again." After shouting at me, he stormed out of the room. I always believed Steve wouldn't betray me, even with his harsh words. It would have been better if he had talked to me about it. Maybe there could have been a better way to help his mother without causing this argument. Did he think I'd say no, or did he not trust me? Instead of our marriage making us closer, it felt like we were growing apart. Steve didn't see anything wrong with using the money without asking. The next day, he acted like nothing happened and went to work after breakfast. I didn't say more because I didn't want another fight, but I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. Meanwhile, the new house was finally done. Despite the business, The construction company was really helpful, and I managed to build a beautiful house. I asked my dad to pack some of his things, but I didn't want him to strain himself, so I hired movers to handle it all for him. With just 2 weeks left until moving day, I was filled with joy thinking about how I could do something special for my dad in the house I had built. On the day we planned to help my dad unpack in the new house, along with Steve, I tried to talk about the arrangements, but then Steve said something shocking. "Hey, that house isn't for your dad. It's going to be for my mom. I have the right to decide who lives in the house I helped build, so it's going to be my mom," he said firmly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. In a panic, I replied, "I built that house. It's for my dad. There's no way you, with your part-time job, could have built it. It's my money that paid for it, so don't act so entitled." It seems like he genuinely believed that it was his money that built the house. When we talked about building it before, he seemed fine with the idea. But now it looks like he planned from the start to make it for his mother, not my dad. That's really unfair. Now I have to prove that I used my own money to build it. I had no choice but to tell him about the rental income I kept hidden until now. I decided to come clean about it. "You're making up stories just because you want the house for yourself. If you're going to lie, at least make it believable," he scoffed. He didn't believe me at all and stormed off somewhere. I was at a loss, but I had to make him understand. While waiting for him to return, he came back looking incredibly angry and then said, "You tried to trick me, saying you built that house. You're a liar. That house is mine because I helped build it. You need to leave, even if we break up. I don't think you can survive on your part-time salary." I was speechless at the sudden turn of events. That house was built with my hard work, and being told to leave so abruptly was too much. "Sign this and get out tonight," he laughed as he slammed divorce papers on the table and headed to his room. His part was already filled out. After constantly putting me down, presenting the divorce papers like that was the lowest he could go. He must have done this awful thing to make me feel hopeless. Maybe he thought bringing up divorce would make me cave in and let his mother live in the house. But little did he know, I had enough money to live on my own without him. This was the final straw for me. I signed the papers and submitted them, then quickly packed my bags and left for my dad's house. My dad was surprised to see me arriving with so much luggage all of a sudden, but he warmly welcomed me in. After I explained everything that had happened, he patted my back and said, "You've been through a lot. You can stay with me in the new house." That would make me happy. Moving day came and everything went smoothly because I was there. We successfully moved in without any issues. I found it a bit strange that my ex-husband hadn't reached out after causing such a scene, claiming the house was his. But I tried not to worry about it because I didn't want to think about someone I was divorced from. A few days after settling into our new home with my father, something unbelievable happened. There was a commotion outside, and when I looked out the window, I saw a big moving truck parked outside, claiming they were moving into our house. I rushed outside to talk to the movers and figure out what was going on. It turned out that the customer was actually my ex-husband, and he was planning to move in with his mother. They wanted to forcefully take over the house where my father and I were already living. Since we were divorced, he was basically a stranger to me now, and it would be a big problem if they just showed up like that. I felt a chilling kind of fear about my ex-husband's aggressive intentions. I explained the situation to the confused movers and asked them to stop their work. Then I talked to my father and quickly called the police. When I told the police what was happening, they confirmed that the house was my property. Since my ex-husband and I were divorced, he had no right to live there, and entering against my will could be considered trespassing. Soon, my ex-husband and his mother arrived. When they saw the police, they started to panic. It finally dawned on him that I was the one who built the house. But with his mother freaking out beside him and the police bombarding him with questions, he lost his cool and yelled, "What's going on? Why can't I live in this house?" Looking at him, I realized I was done dealing with such a person. But to protect my father and myself, I handed over the final piece of evidence to the police. Although the situation calmed down thanks to their intervention, I later heard that my ex-husband faced serious consequences. He was so serious about living in the house that he canceled his apartment lease and even sold his mother's house, leaving him with no place to go. With a breach of contract fee demanded by the movers and a truckload of belongings, he found himself stranded on the street with his mother. The final piece of evidence I gave to the police was footage of the verbal abuse, essentially domestic violence, that my ex-husband subjected me to. Unable to endure his abusive language any longer, I had installed surveillance cameras to record everything. The footage showed me diligently doing housework while he constantly spewed unreasonable abuse. Using this evidence, I managed to further corner him. I hired a lawyer and sued him, eventually extracting a settlement. The expenses from the moving chaos and the settlement depleted the money he got from selling his mother's house and his own savings. Now he and his mother are reportedly living in a rundown apartment. Word of this spread quickly at his workplace. Realizing there was something wrong with his character, his colleagues distanced themselves, and now he is isolated and frowned upon by everyone at the company. As for me, I finally got to adopt a cat. My father's back has completely healed, and we're discussing taking a trip with the cat. I also used the settlement money to open a shop dealing with cat goods. It was challenging at first, and there were failures, but gradually customers increased and the business is thriving. Every day is peaceful and truly enjoyable. I never thought that the action I took for my father's sake would lead to my own happiness. I truly feel that it was the right decision. Recently, there has been a happy development. A man who always comes to my shop and chats pleasantly has been particularly kind to both people and cats. We've made plans to go for a drive together. I'm going to live my life freely and enjoyably. I'm excited about the new happiness that's about to begin.